I always enjoy the conversations in the hallway after a sermon. And today I am not feeling very well. I'm on the upswing from not feeling well yesterday, and so I am going to keep my distance so that I don't spread whatever it is that I'm getting over. So I won't be able to mingle with you after worship today, but please do reach out if you would like to talk more. About a year ago, I attended the Rooted and Grounded conference at Anabaptist Mennonite Biblical Seminary. We were sent outside during one of the sessions to listen to the wisdom of creation. I was very tired, and I thought that maybe creation in all her wisdom was calling me to go rest, so I found a tree and settled against the trunk of the tree. I watched as the leaves drifted down around me, onto me. And then I looked up and watched the branches that seemingly effortlessly were just letting go of those trees. And like a child asked in children's time, I wondered, how? God has created these branches with the wisdom to know when it's time to release. The leaves change color, signaling what's coming. The trees hold those branches, the firm hold that those branches have had on those leaves begins to loosen. And then as the season of turning comes to an end, the branches release. They're not letting go of those leaves because it just sounds like such a good time or because they're sick of holding them up. They release these leaves, which have created energy and life, which have sustained the tree, because it's time. It's part of the cyclical nature of the tree's life. If the tree doesn't release its leaves, then that signifies that something is wrong with the tree or with its environment. Maybe there's drought, there could be root damage, or maybe global warming is having a disruptive effect. A healthy tree produces leaves, collects energy from leaves, allows them to change color, and then releases them to become part of the soil, which will nourish the tree in the resting months and help the tree to produce new leaves when that time comes. A healthy tree follows the cycle of the seasons. Watching that cycle happening over my head, I felt a little convicted. If God has created trees with the wisdom to know when it's time to recognize a season, then God has probably created me with some of that ability as well. If trees can release when it's time, then with the help of God, I can too. There is a season for every purpose under heaven. In our Bible story today, Jesus and the people of Jesus' hometown are in a season. Jesus is 30 years old, and his time had come. It was time to begin his 3-year season of walking this earth, teaching, healing, proclaiming. He began his season by being baptized by his cousin John, and then going on a 40-day spiritual quest in the wilderness. And then he went up to Nazareth, to his hometown of Galilee. And on Sabbath, as was his custom, Jesus went to synagogue. In a time when a lot of people were illiterate, Jesus was apparently literate, and he was handed the scroll of Isaiah to take his turn reading in the synagogue. And he read these words from Luke 4:18 through 21, quoting the prophet Isaiah. "The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, because he has anointed me to bring good news to the poor. He has sent me to proclaim release to the captives and recovery of sight to the blind, to let the oppressed go free, to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor." And he rolled up the scroll, gave it back to the attendant, and sat down. The eyes of all the synagogue were fixed on him. Then he began to say to them, "Today, this scripture has been fulfilled in your hearing." The word of the Lord. When it was his season, Jesus proclaimed release and freedom. He proclaimed what everyone recognized, because that's what this passage was, a messianic message. All of that signaled to the people around him the season of the Messiah was at hand. It's the season of freedom and release and good news. At first, Jesus' hometown people were really pleased. This is Joseph's son. He's our kid. He's so well-spoken. He's so gracious. They were proud of him. This community had raised Jesus. Together, they had hoped and prayed for a Messiah. And now Jesus, son of their community, was that Messiah that they had hoped for, was proclaiming that message. This was wonderful news. But then something turned. They had this conversation with Jesus where he described the broad inclusiveness of who this good news was for, and something shifted. Scholars have some varying ideas of what goes wrong at this point in the story. A fairly traditional Christian view is that the people of Nazareth responded with ethnocentrism. So in other words, this message that Jesus was proclaiming sounded like good news for Gentiles, and that didn't sound good to them. The problem with this view is that in the story of God's people, that boundary of who's in and out is actually very permeable. Jewish scholars today say that ethnocentrism explanation doesn't make a lot of sense if one understands first century Jewish thought. Instead, they suggest that Jesus' hometown people wanted to contain Jesus to their little world, wanted to keep his messianic blessing for themselves in Galilee. I don't know. However we interpret this, though, there's some expectation of this Messiah that Jesus refuses to meet. He won't stay. He won't beam all his blessedness on them. He's going to share it beyond the synagogue walls, beyond the town's borders. Jesus is a free agent. Freedom and release come from a free God. And the people didn't like that. So they drove him out of town. They threatened to throw him off a cliff. This is big. And then scripture says that Jesus passed through the midst of them and went on his way. Jesus continued his ministry, rarely returning to his hometown. The leaves were turning, but the people didn't like the way that they were turning. So instead of opening their hearts, instead of being part of this exciting rejuvenation, they reacted with violence and hatred. They couldn't release their expectations. In a season of rebirth and growth, they held on tight to their leaves, signifying something's not right. A couple of weeks ago, I got a text from Krista Ruel. She and Jonathan had just attended the listening session about transitions with the church board. The two of them have done a lot of artistic work in and through transitions, and they felt ready to offer their church community what they could as we walk through our current season together. Krista sent me a picture of this piece right here. In her text, she said, I've got 3 by 4 foot fall-colored pieces called 90 degrees, created out of the experiences of transition as being carried off in a different direction than was originally planned or expected. They are available. So I got her in touch with Sue. And now we are all enjoying them as part of this season in our worship life together. Being carried off in a different direction than was originally planned. That happens sometimes when we release. Releasing can be scary. But when we don't do it, we miss out on what Jesus is doing. Or like a tree, we learn that something in our roots or in our climate is not okay. You all see the metaphor here, right? I've been speaking in metaphor this whole sermon. And like all metaphors, it breaks down eventually. There are so many ways that this metaphor breaks down, and I just want to name that. But it still has a lot to offer. Our lives, our communal life, our church life, has seasons. Release, rest, rebirth, growth. Release, rest, rebirth, growth. We do this. It's part of a healthy rhythm of life. Each season offers gifts. Each season sustains life. Each season has its challenges. And we, like a tree, have roots, deep roots, that are interconnected with other root systems in this beautiful web of life. We are a particular species of tree. We are part of an ecosystem. We grow, we bear leaves that give us energy, give us life, give life to those around us. Sometimes those leaves are specific people or specific ministries. Sometimes they're structures or expectations or cultural norms. And at some point, some of those leaves shift a little. Their beauty begins to change to a different kind of beauty, and they begin to pull away. We release them. They flutter to the ground. They don't go to the burn pile because we believe in composting. So the leaves become part of the soil that nourishes our roots, that continues to be part of us and part of the ecosystem around us. We catch our breath and rest, and soon fresh leaves begin to grow. Like Jim said, in January, I will have been a pastor here for 16 years. That's a really long time. We've been together long enough to weather quite a few seasons together. I count at least 3 season cycles that we've been through together. Your count might be different from mine. I don't think there's a real science to this, which is maybe ironic given the metaphor. I think we might currently be in autumn again. Sometimes in autumn we're tempted to deny the changing of the season. We insist those leaves are still green when they are definitely red and gold and orange. Or we ignore the vibrant leaves and proclaim that all the leaves are gone and everything's dead. Or we hold on to the leaves long after the season to release them has passed. Or lots of things in between all of those. Sometimes I think that somewhere along the way we got it into our heads that the goal is perpetual summer. We don't quite always know how to accept the gift of the cycle of seasons. I think that God, in all of God's infinite wisdom, sustains us with the cycle. As I lived with this sermon over these last couple of weeks, I reflected on my own role in these seasons and saw that as a leader, I have not always done well in autumn. I'm naturally better at spring. I've been known to insist that the leaves are still green. I've been known to get impatient for us to just release the leaves already instead of enjoying their vibrant colors. Or I've rushed us to celebrate the life that the fallen leaves are giving to the soil, or to get excited about the new leaves. I've gotten too far out ahead of the season. I'm sorry for that. That's not helpful. And in this season of our lives together, I commit to slowing down, to gazing with all of you, going for autumnal walks together, to join you as we release our hold of what needs to be released when the time comes. Leaves around us are changing color, signifying with their vibrant colors that release is coming, inviting us to loosen our grip, to trust. We get a chance to live this season well. So let's do this together. In this time we are in, point out the changing leaves. Celebrate the burst of beauty. Acknowledge our grief at the changing of seasons. Name the grief of releasing leaves that we love. Express our gratitude for the gifts of nourishment and cleansing and life of the leaves that we have been blessed with. Pray together as we prepare our hearts, our collective body, for the change that is to come, even if we don't know exactly what it will look like, even if it looks a little different than we planned. And together we trust that after the rest that follows that hard work of release, new leaves will grow. This is not a time of uprooting a tree. This is a season in the life of a tree. It's part of a cycle that we have lived through together over and over, which has proven to bring life and health and joy. We are in the care of our Creator, who sustains us with seasons and soil and water and sunshine, whose work it is to give life and help us grow. So we can take a collective breath. We are us. God is God. God was, God is, and God will be. Thanks be to God.